I kind of want to just do two very kind of brief things and kind of share with you a little bit of where I've been this week. And so what's cool is that this past week I actually had the opportunity to be in Rapid City, South Dakota. I was the camp speaker for the Dakota District of the Wesleyan Church. They have two separate camps, a middle school camp and a high school camp, and I had the incredible opportunity to be the camp speaker for their high school camp. And so this past week I spoke to over 250 students and leaders in a camp in Rapid City, South Dakota, right in the Black Hills. I told someone it's the pretty part of South Dakota, not the ugly part. So it was absolutely spectacular, but what I want you guys to know is that as you guys sent me, in essence, I was representing us here at Open Arms out there in South Dakota, and we had over 25 students this past week make a first-time commitment to Jesus Christ. And so it was a spectacular week. And so always good to be home, always good to be back and with our church family. So I'm incredibly excited about where we're going to go this morning. But on top of that, also, I know I said this is the first week, and my hope and my desire is, as I have the great opportunity to lead this church, is that I never lose my gratitude for you all. And this week, I know that you guys have given financially. I know that you guys have poured in prayer and poured in hard work to help make that parsonage, our home, what it is. And so what's great is that the backyard is finished. Yes. It looks wonderful, and on top of that, you guys have just poured out food and taken us out to dinner and to lunch and just random notes of encouragement. We, again, just want to say thank you to every single one of you guys. I mean, Ashley and I have definitely felt the love of this community being here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. In the coming weeks, we're going to have, kind of towards the end of August, early September, we want to have you guys over. We're going to have kind of an open house to kind of you guys to see everything and to hang out and hopefully get to know us in our space. I think that's an important thing to be able to do, and so you'll hear more about that as we get there. But on top of that, what's great is that I feel that really leading this whole thing, George and Anna, would you stand up? I just have to say, I know you have no idea that I'm doing this, but these guys work what I call a real job, right? Because like, sometimes as pastors, we don't really have like real jobs. We're kind of make our own hours and we get to be with people. That's like our job. It's awesome, right? But you guys have just led the way so beautifully in giving of your time and of your energy. I mean, Sunday after church, I mean, you guys are here at like 7 a.m. and then Sunday after church, they're over there measuring stuff for appliances and they're out shopping, and then after their job, they're getting home late at night and giving just of yourselves. So thank you. You guys are loved and appreciated, so thank you. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for the gratitude that we feel for you both. So thank you guys. Well, here we go, right? So we're going to be diving in to really our final installment of this storyteller series. And so hopefully you have a Bible, hopefully you have a pen, hopefully you have a bulletin. If you don't have any of those things, I'm sure we have some somewhere. I'm new here, I don't know what's going on. No, so hopefully you guys can dive in and take some notes. And as you're kind of getting that ready, over the past couple weeks, we've been talking about stories. And if you haven't been here and you're kind of coming in on the tail end of all this, let me give you like the Twitter version of the last 2 weeks of where we've been, so you're able to go forward with us today. So basically the first week what we said is that for every single one of us, no matter where we've been in life, no matter what our story is, no matter what our thing is, right? Like no matter who you are, we're all participating in a story. And the stories that we find ourselves involved in, they shape us. The decisions that we make, they affect us, and they basically, all of us, every single one of us, we are all a product of our stories. And then you remember, if you were here last week, we said that sometimes whether we recognize it, sometimes whether we believe it, sometimes whether we understand it or not, we find ourselves in a story that's just less than what it could be. See, ultimately this happens because we have this subtle shift where at times we make a decision to bring God from a place of priority to a place on the perimeter. And so we talked about how that puts us in a story that's left in, because it just basically belittles this larger story that's happening all around us. The story that God has been telling long before you were even a thought in your parents' mind. And he'll be telling it well after you and I are long gone. And so our basic bottom line was that when we become the point, our story has no longevity. Our story has no staying power. But again, of course, that was the last 2 weeks. This morning, I'm very excited about where we're going to go, and I felt the worship team just did a beautiful job of just ushering us into the presence of God this morning. Amen? Amen. And so I'm very, very excited about the word that I feel God has for us as a community, as a body, as a church, as a congregation. And so what we have to understand is that this whole idea of stories, all of that very easily could just be news to every single one of you. It very well could be that the story that you are participating in, the story that you currently find yourself involved in, was never something that you thought was wrong. Maybe you never thought it as fake or a counterfeit. It could be that the story that you currently find yourself in, it was so engaging. It was so inviting. It was so attractive that you just went for it. And of course, if we're honest, right, there are times that it doesn't feel right. There are times that we wonder if maybe we've settled, and sometimes maybe you find yourself thinking like, you know what, and in my life, in my situation, in my circumstance, in my experience, I'm just not getting what I want. Or maybe I'm just not getting everything that I expected. I'm just not getting what I think that I deserve. But maybe you also find yourself, while asking those questions, while mulling that over in your head, maybe you also find yourself not really wanting to run the risk of what's familiar. Maybe you find yourself not really wanting to run the risk to leave whatever that is for something new, for something unknown. And so very quickly, you find yourself sticking with the story that you're participating in, because quite honestly, maybe you find yourself not sure that you want to know what the alternative is. I mean, maybe that the time that it could be that all the time that you have spent living whatever story you are, all the energy, I mean, it's all you know for some of us. It's just the way that we live. Of all the time, maybe we've spent manipulating things around us. Manipulating things to benefit you. Manipulating things for me to benefit me. It could be that maybe you find yourself with this distorted picture of God. And maybe that leaves you discontent. And maybe you think, you know what, I'm just discontent with the story that I'm living in. I'm just discontent with where I've been in my life. I'm discontent because I'm not getting what I want. I'm discontent because I'm not getting what I think that I need or what I think that I deserve. If you've ever said that, if you've ever thought that, sometimes, as I have, sometimes I find myself realizing that maybe it's not discontentment in a story. Maybe it's just discontentment with who I've made my God out to be. Maybe for you, you think that God should fit into your life how you think he should fit in. Maybe sometimes we think that the story that we've created, it just isn't working. Maybe God isn't doing the things that you would like him to do. Maybe he's not delivering everything that you expect him to deliver. And that, church, is maybe why people like you and people like me begin to feel discontent. We begin to feel unsatisfied, unsettled, unhappy. So this morning we're going to talk and answer the question of what's the alternative. I mean, really, when it all boils down to it, when we talk about this idea of a bigger story, what does that bigger story look like? I mean, really, when it all boils down to it, what does that real story look like that you and I have been talking about? And in that real story, when it's all said and done, are we able to be delivered the things that we really want? Or when we take part in that bigger story, does what we really want end up ultimately changing? And maybe today you find yourself and you say, you know what, I don't know if I'm a part of God's story. How can I get involved? How can I begin to rewrite the story that I'm currently in? And where in the world, how do you even know where to begin? Lots of questions. Tons of mystery inside of it, but that's what we're going to cover today. One of the most famous biblical stories is actually about the Hebrew people, Israel. And one of it was, what happens is that it involves the story that we've been talking about, right? It's their journey out of Egypt, out of slavery, into the wilderness, and ultimately, where did they end up? The promised land. What's crazy is that every single year around Easter, the classic old movie, The Ten Commandments. Have you guys ever seen the movie The Ten Commandments, right? You guys have a tradition, maybe you watch it every year that it's on TV. No one? All right, me either, right? That's all right. But what's crazy is that the special effects, you guys, how many, you all seen it maybe in the past year? Yeah. Right, you can picture it, right? I mean, remember the special effects of Moses parting the Red Sea and how, like, phenomenal those were for the time, and now they're just terrible. You know? It's so funny. But that story, the whole story that the movie walks us through, it has more to do than just that one miracle of the Red Sea parting. I mean, God was actively involved in that story. So if you have your Bibles, why don't you turn to the book of Exodus. Exodus is the second book of the entire Bible, Genesis, Exodus. We're going to be in Exodus 13, and as you're turning there, what we're going to read is that Moses had just led the people of Israel across dry land through the Red Sea. I mean, just imagine for a second that you're a part of this group of people, you know? I mean, just imagine like having just escaped your captors, literally by the skin of your teeth, barely escaping them, and you're walking through two literal walls of water. You're on dry land and the water is just there. Like I imagine like looking through and seeing like fish. Like yeah, that's what happens in my head. I don't know what happens in your head, right? But I mean, I just imagine that. Walking through a canyon with the walls of water on the side of you, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the desert. I mean, just think about the adrenaline rush. The high of having just barely escaping your captors with your life, and then you end up in the middle of nowhere. I mean, can you imagine the letdown? Can you imagine the adrenaline crash when reality hits you? The reality of now you find yourself in a desert. You now find yourself in the middle of the wilderness. And I imagine every single person in that group is now looking around and saying, huh, now what? And that is where we pick up. So listen to what the Bible tells us. In Exodus 13, verses 20 through 22, it says this. The Israelites left Succoth and camped at Etham. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's what I'm rolling with. On the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went ahead of them. He guided them during the day with a pillar of clouds, and he provided light at night with a pillar of fire. This allowed them to travel by day or by night. And the Lord did not remove the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire from its place in front of the people. Okay. 3 verses. I mean, we just read 3 verses. But as you and I get to kind of dive into this story a little bit, I mean, I would say that these are 3 very critical verses. I mean, don't miss what we're being told here. Don't miss the truth of this tiny little paragraph. God was leading the people of Israel. And what's crazy is it wasn't just in like the figurative sense. Like you church people, if you're out there, like you get this, right? Sometimes we have this phrase where we say, you know, God led me to marry this person. God led me to move here. God led me to go to this college. God led me to take this job, right? How many of you guys ever thought that or said that in some way, shape, or form? Right? Like that's just kind of common verbiage, you know? Obviously, this situation is a little bit different than that. I mean, God literally showed up. God physically showed up, and he appeared like a pillar of clouds in the day. And then at night, I don't know how it went down. I don't know if it was like, boom, all of a sudden it's fire now, or if like the clouds engulfed in flames and that just like hung out for the rest of the night. I have no idea. But at night, it was a pillar of fire. I mean, what's crazy is that God didn't just take the Israelites. He didn't take them and just drop them off in the middle of the desert with a bag of croutons and just say, get on going. Hope you make it. Hope you'll be okay. I mean, no, we see that God stayed involved. God stayed present. And here's what I think is the most important truth of this entire scripture that we just read. God stayed in control. I mean, church, we just read it. It says he never left his place in front of the people. I mean, in those moments, there's literally zero mistake as to who's in charge there. I imagine if like someone got a little fed up and annoyed and frustrated because it's too hot or because they're walking too much and they had an issue, right? It's like, hey, you got a problem? Take it up with the wall of fire over here. You know, you can go have that conversation. You know, it's like, okay, touche, like you got it. I mean, there was no question who was in this story. The people of Israel were participating, active participants in the story of God. God was the one leading. God was the one calling the shots. God was the one who invited the nation of Israel to be a part of what God was already doing. In other words, church, we get this glimpse where we see where God was not the assistant. God was, in fact, the one and only storyteller, and the Israelites were a part, and they followed. God went ahead, and Israel came behind. Here's what I think is so interesting about this whole thing. I mean, I don't know about you, when I read this, I think like that had to have been a trip walking through all of that, following clouds and following fire. I think it's interesting that God chose to manifest himself in those ways. I mean, in clouds and fire. It's not like he gave Moses like the first iPhone ever and was like, hey, like Siri's going to take care of it. Like, just follow whatever she says. She'll give you the turn by turn. You'll ride, boom, at the promised land. You're good to go. See ya. I mean, he never told, and then on top of that, he never gave the Israelites a play-by-play. I mean, not once did he ever say, all right, Israel, listen up, here's what's going down today. These of you type A people who want that schedule of what's happening, like God didn't do that. He never once was like, all right, we're going to go, we're going to start here, we're going to walk this way, we're going to take a break in 45 minutes so you guys can use the bathrooms and have some fruit snacks, and then we're going to keep going, and we're going to camp here, and I'll feed you, and you can get some water, and he didn't designate bathroom spots and other things like that. I mean, simply, God just chose literal pictures of mystery. A cloud. Fire. I mean, those are the two images that he chose to lead the way. I don't know who you are, but I do know that you can't box in a cloud. You can't contain fire. Both are mysterious. Both are uncontrollable. Both are out of your hands. And church, that's God for you. I mean, we can't begin to take him and begin to try to fit him into the areas and the places that we desire. God does as he pleases. He stays out front. And church, you and I, we get the incredible opportunity to follow behind. I mean, right here, we, you, me, us, We choose to be a part of his story. We choose to embrace the mystery. We choose to embrace the wonder of it all. Even if we don't get it, even if we don't understand it, even if we can't begin to see our place in it, because it's not our story to write, it's his. And I think that for a lot of us, regardless of your age, regardless of your circumstance, I think that for a lot of us, we have this tendency to want to hand God a list of all these places in our life where we want him involved. And then we have the other side where we say, you know what, God, this is where I really don't want you involved. I mean, church, we can come in here week after week, and we can sit under great worship. And we can have these passionate moments of worship where we say, God, take the lead. God, we want you to do this. God, I want to follow. I mean, we all have this tendency, if you will. And what's funny is that we kind of save the day-to-day life for something that's a little bit different. I mean, God, maybe not in my day-to-day life. Maybe just when I'm in the moment. God, maybe you just lead just when I'm really passionate and really for you in that moment. But everything else, God, not until I give you the all clear. It's interesting. I remember this. I was in college. And I once heard someone say, at the end of their prayer, they said, God, in this situation, whatever you want. God, whatever you want in this situation. Now, let me be completely real. For me, I mean, it's that kind of prayer that sometimes I am so often, terrified to pray. I mean, have you ever felt that way? See, some of you in this room, I mean, if you're honest, you would say, you know what, Scott, I'm a little bit like you in that. I mean, a lot of times we'll sing and we'll talk about how we want God to be in control. We'll talk about how we want to do everything that God wants us to do. We want to follow, we want to believe, we want to engage, but we fall short of praying and living in such a way where our life, where our attitude, where our character, where our heart and soul say, God, whatever you want, whenever you want. And that right there is what the Israelites found themselves doing every single day when they saw this pillar of cloud, every single night when they saw this pillar of fire, and every single time that they saw either of those two things, they were making a choice to choose God's story, to choose his leading, to choose his script over their own script, no matter what that might mean. See, I think that the truth is that not all of us, maybe in fact there are not many of us, who can honestly say that we're in a place where we can pray that confidently to follow God's leading in that way. I think a lot of us might shy away from that whole, God, whatever you got, I'm in. I mean, that's scary to us. We're not quite ready to give up that kind of control. And maybe you do. Maybe you actually do find yourself in a place where you say, you know what? I just can't pray that prayer. Let me tell you, that's okay. Church, that's okay. Because honestly, for me, I kind of admire someone. I admire someone who refuses to pray a prayer like that because they know that they have no intent to follow through. I admire that kind of person over the kind of person who says that they pray that kind of thing and they know they have no intention of ever even attempting it. And what I believe as well is that God can handle it too. I mean, I think he wants your honest admission over your fake commitment. Am I right? And to be completely real, for me, I still struggle with allowing God to narrate my story. That's still a hardship that I have. In fact, just 3 months ago, 3 months ago was probably one of the biggest struggles of story in my adult life. In fact, if God was not narrating my story, I can guarantee that there's no way that I'd ever be standing on this stage in front of you today. Because when I felt, church, when I knew that God was calling me and Ashley to take our girls and to move here, quite honestly, everything in me wanted to resist. We lived in Sacramento for about 2.5 years. We were comfortable. I mean, for the first time in our marriage, we had finally moved to a place where we had family, we were home, we had friends. In fact, what's even crazier is that just a couple months before that, I had conversations with my wife about almost resigning myself to just stepping out of ministry, period. I was just tired. I was just done. And then God threw Arizona at me. God showed us. Amen. God showed us you. Open arms. And honestly, it was intriguing. But once again, if I'm honest, I very quickly would have said, you know what, I'm sorry, God, but we're good. We're going to stay here. We're going to stay where we're comfortable. We're going to stick here for right now. See, church, as I said, if I were writing my story, we would have very easily stayed in our comfort zone. We would have stayed exactly where we knew that we were safe. We would have never stepped out on risk at all. But church, let me tell you, we allowed God to write the story. And we let that go. And the reward? Wow, I mean, here we are. For Ashley and myself, we have this opportunity to show our daughters what living life with God as the storyteller, what it looks like. And this is what we get to be a part of. We simply pray, God, whatever, wherever, whenever. And here we are. I mean, God blew our minds. And we get to be a part of this story that God has been telling and that God continues to tell in the community of Scottsdale, Arizona. We get to be part of something huge, of something spectacular, because we were willing to give up what we felt to follow God's leading. See, I think there may be some of us here today. There may be some of you here who maybe you sit there and you want to trade in this fake, comfortable, plush, counterfeit story. And maybe you say, you know what? I want God to rewrite my story. Maybe for you, you say, you know what? I want to let go of control. I want to become part of the story that God is telling. And for me, as I stand here today, that's where I find myself. But the reality of it is that I still struggle with what it means to trade in my story. Church, I struggle with what it means to find where God is and to follow the cloud and to follow the fire. Because it can be a difficult and terrifying thing to do, and not many people truly do it. Because in fact, oftentimes, you know it and I know it, those times where we say, God, we're giving up control. God, we want you to take this. More often than not, a lot of times we end up taking back control away from Him anyways. And what's insane and what's powerful and what's spectacular is that God's story has an element of mystery to it. Remember, Israel is following a cloud. They're following fire. But even in the mystery, there was this degree of certainty. And church, the only certainty that Israel had in those moments was that they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God was in the cloud and that God was in the fire. He never left his place in front of the people. And church, I stand before you today to say in the exact same way, there is mystery for you. There is mystery for me in our personal lives. There is mystery for us as a community, as a church, as an organization following God, because the control, quite honestly, is well out of our hands. But God will never leave you guessing as to what his story is. God will never leave you guessing as to what his stories entail, because quite honestly, this right here, this is God's story. Amen. This is the story. God's story is defined by generosity. God's story is defined by humility and kindness and patience and peace and loving people and reaching the lost. And when you and I, when we begin to live that way, when we begin to pursue these kinds of things, we begin to choose God's story instead of our own. We begin to let God have the reins, and following him, as mysterious as it may be, as scary as it may be, as uncomfortable as it may be, we begin to let him take the reins. We begin to follow anywhere and everywhere that he begins to lead. I know I'm just getting to know you all. And I may not know every detail of your life. I might not know the circumstance that you come in with today. But I do know that every single one of us, we have the ability to lead and live a great story with our life. We have that ability. Because quite honestly, it has nothing to do with your background. It has nothing to do with your social class or your status or your family, but it has everything in the world to do with your ability to say and my ability to say, God, whatever, whenever, wherever. Church, it has everything to do with our ability to say, God, not my happiness, not my safety, but what you're doing. God, I just want to be a part. I want to start living like your story matters. I want to start living and participating in what your story invites me to do. See, the great thing about stories is that every single one that you have ever read, every single one that you have ever heard, every single one that you have ever experienced, they often have these twists and these turns and these plot changes and character developments that we sometimes never see coming. The exact same thing is true in God's story. It's not too late. Church, it's not too late for you to start rewriting your story. It's not too late for you to participate in this grandiose endeavor, this huge earth-shattering revolution that God is inviting us to take part of. It's not too late. It doesn't matter what your story has been. It doesn't matter who's been the central character. It doesn't matter what message you've been promoting. All of that can change. You can decide right now whose story you want to be in from this point on. We begin to say things like, you know what, I want to treat others with kindness, even when it hurts. Or you know what, I want to be generous, even when it feels like I have nothing. I want to choose humility over being recognized. I want to choose them over myself. I mean, these are the kinds of things that lead us into God's story. These are the kind of statements and beliefs and actions that allow us to be a part of a better story. Because when you and I as a church as individuals within a greater body, taking part in a larger story. When we respond to life, to people, to circumstances in those ways, God shines bright as a central part of a much bigger story. And church, all we have to do is to look around to see it unfolding. As the band comes up, we simply wanted to mark this moment. I think it's cool, the whole idea of talking about stories, talking about how you and I can jump in to rewrite our stories, to rehash the details. There is one reason, and one reason alone, that you and I are even able to taste that opportunity. Church, it's all because of what Jesus Christ did on the cross for you and for me. And I've actually heard it put it this way, and it's not mine, but if it's cool enough, I'm going to call it mine. But the world out there, they drink to forget. This morning, I want to invite you in to drink to remember. The whole reason that you're invited to be a part of this greater story. So this morning, as we come to the Lord's table, this morning, as we simply have some cracker, we drink some juice, my hope, church, and my desire is that you walk up here and grab one of these and you'll take it back to your seat. Come on up the center aisle, go around the sides, but come up and simply sit. As the band plays, just simply sit and reflect on this powerful, incredible truth that the God of the universe, the all-powerful, all-loving God of everything, is inviting you to participate in the greatest story ever told. So church, when you're ready, come up in this moment and receive. As I said, I just simply challenge you to reflect on your place in the bigger story. And maybe for you, maybe for the first time. For the first time in your life, for the first time in your adult life, maybe it's just for the first time this week. You might be saying, you know what, I just haven't been living as I should. I've wanted God to fit into the places that I want Him in those places alone, not these other places. Today, should you choose to participate in God's story where He's the point, where He's the central character, where He's the purpose behind it all, allow this moment to be your altar moment. As I said the first week, when big, crazy, wonderful God moments happened, they built memorials. They built altars. So church, this morning, let this be your altar. Let this be your moment where you say, God, invite me in to whatever, whenever, broke it, and he said, "Take. Do this in remembrance of me." So church, this morning, take in remembrance of what Jesus Christ has done. And then he took the cup and said, "This is my blood, poured out, spilled for every single one of you." Church, so take, remembering what Jesus Christ did for you. Pray with me. Heavenly Father, God, this morning, we take this today to remember the sacrifice that you made, the gift that you gave, and the story that you invite us into. We know that it all hinges on you, God, and you alone. So right now, we worship, we reflect, God, we celebrate with grateful hearts the God that you are. Lord, we give you the glory. We give you the honor. We give you the praise. And again, God, right now, we give you our worship. It's in your name.